we are known as Ronald Reagan's think tank, I'm a son of the Reagan Revolution, I'm very proud of that, that's 40 years ago. And we need to understand what time it is in America. And right now, Donald Trump, whether someone likes it or not, I happen to like it, is the standard bearer for conservatism.
Well, Michael, what time is it?
Donald Trump, an ideologically inconsistent, malignant narcissist and authoritarian, somebody who was Democrat in the past, Republican then, Democrat again, independent, Republican, basically somebody who has no fixed ideology whatsoever and certainly no principles, according to this guy, is the standard bearer for conservative. And so we should enshrine him. We should make Trumpism. We're trying to enshrine it in government. Nobody says, not just for the next 4 years or the next couple of presidential cycles, but basically forever. They want to digitize and codify Trump, just suffuse the essence of Trump into our very government. Really gross stuff. But he also says some more unhinged things.
So at Heritage, we see this a very different way. You want to look at it from the lens of unelected bureaucrats, most of whom, not your dad, I guess, who want to say that they are more important than the everyday American. We want to look at it from the standpoint of the everyday American and say it's time that they are put in the driver's seat rather than unelected bureaucrats.
Yeah, but they aren't going to be in the driver's seat because they aren't going to be doing the jobs. The folks you're identifying who are Trump aligned are the ones who are going to be coming in. You
are positing that those people are incompetent. And I can tell you from looking at the resumes of the 11,000 that they're very well
as
qualified.
much as you're thinking I'm positing these people are incompetent, you're positing that they're somehow executing a nefarious agenda.
Some of them are. Why does the Environmental Protection Agency have 300?
Have you identified them?
If I could interject.
So see what Kevin Roberts is doing here? Again, they're talking about firing as many federal employees as possible in order to replace them. He says right now they've looked at 11,000 resumes of Trump sycophants to replace career civil servants, bureaucrats, experts, people who have worked for Democrat and Republican administrations competently and loyally to keep the government running, and replace them with MAGA cultists. Okay. Now he's saying you can't just assume that they're incompetent. Okay, but why are you assuming that the people in place currently who've proven themselves and who have infinitely more experience, why should we assume that they're incompetent? We have more reason to believe that they're competent than the MAGA cultists that you're currently vetting to, enact Donald Trump's dystopian agenda. Again, they assume the worst in everybody else and demand an unreasonable level of charity, to say nothing of just how deranged it is to want to turn the entire federal government into the sitting president's vanity project. And it also makes you wonder, would Roberts be taking this posture if it were coming from the left, if it were coming from Democrats, if President Biden said, you know what, I want to fire every single federal employee. I want power to do it at will if they do anything to displease me, and then I should be able to unilaterally replace them with any far left activist that I want. How would this guy react? He'd be clutching his pearls. No, you can't do that. Because, of course, he doesn't believe this notion principally about executive power. He doesn't want Democrats to avail themselves of executive power. Executive power can't be given to Democrats. It's not fair. Then it should be constrained. But for conservatives, then they should have the maximalist approach to executive power. He would never tolerate this sort of approach coming from a Democrat. Thank God, typically, Democrats don't try to seize power and have a thirst and lust for power the way that Republican politicians do. If you thought that was unhinged, now the topic turns to whether or not Roberts and the Heritage Foundation will accept the results of the upcoming election.
I actually, Dr. Roberts, have a question about this upcoming election. Is your organization going to accept the results of the 2024 presidential election?
I believe that Dr. Roberts can't hear. So Alicia just asked, is your organization going to accept the results of the 2024 election, regardless of the outcome?
Yes, if there isn't massive fraud like there was in 2020.
What does that mean?
If there isn't massive fraud.
Do you believe that there was not massive fraud?
There was massive fraud. We have an election fraud database that has documented that over years. By the way, the Heritage Foundation has been concerned about election integrity for decades, not just about 2020. We've been documenting this problem for a very long time. And if one of the
I believe, according to the Heritage Foundation, sir, by your count, Heritage Foundation has done an investigation, and according to your count, there have been 1,513 proven instances of voter fraud across the United States since 1982.
Yeah, that's probably
1,513.
Because they're very hard to document. And the Democrat Party is very good at fraud. The key thing here,
So you see how dishonest this man. We talked about the Heritage Foundation's voter fraud database, and for every instance of a Democrat committing voter fraud, you can find one from their own damn database of a Republican doing the same. So see how when confronted and uncomfortable with the facts, his own facts being used against him, because of course facts generally favor Democrats and not Republicans. He says, well, Democrats are really good at committing fraud. Well, your database includes Republicans committing fraud. Are they committing fraud on behalf of Democrats? And also, if you have 1,000 instances over the span of 42 years, that's a statistical blip of a 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 blip. 1,000 in one election cycle wouldn't be sufficient to overturn the results of an election. So you are orders of magnitude off. And by the way, you were the one who claimed that there was widespread voter fraud. You should be able to prove it. And if you can't prove it, maybe you should shut up. I thought you have a PhD. Shouldn't you understand how basic logic works? No one cares about your feelings. And no one should care about your feelings. This is where, again, people like this should be made fun of relentlessly and mocked using their own Ben Shapiro logic. Facts don't care about your feelings, gang. He should be trolled with that relentlessly and be given a tissue box for him to wipe his tears away. Also, he says, well, you know, it's not even, by the way, just for Republicans. We are concerned with election integrity in every election cycle. It's not just 2020. Okay, well, then were you calling for mass audits and investigations into the 2016 election? Your Heritage Foundation president, because polls showed that Democrats had serious doubts about the 2016 election. It wasn't like Hillary Clinton or Barack Obama were saying that Trump didn't win the election. Hillary Clinton, as a matter of fact, publicly explicitly conceded in hours after the election took place. So there was nothing like the wave of conspiracy theories coming from MAGA in 2020. There was no Democratic counterpart to that in 2016. But according to polls, a majority of Democrats thought that Russia intervened on Donald Trump's behalf. I mean, he was actively courting them. He asked them to hack, the DNC and Hillary's emails and things like that. But the bottom line is, whether they were valid concerns or not, millions of Americans had doubts about the 2016 election. I don't recall Kevin Roberts and the Heritage Foundation advocating for mass recounts and audits and investigations because they were satisfied with the particular outcome. See, Donald Trump, a Republican, their guy, won that election, and they didn't give a damn who doubted it or had any concerns. It was cry harder, liberal snowflake, and they took their trophy and took the presidency. So he's a liar when he says that he has a genuine principled interest in election integrity, no matter who wins. If Republicans win, they blindly accept the outcome, come hell or high water. If a Democrat wins, then that's a different story. What an unprincipled loser. Last clip I want to show you is when the topic turns to abortion and plans with respect to abortion.
The entire
Before we let you go, Dr. Roberts, I do want to ask you about abortion because it is a issue that is at the top of mind for folks all over this country right now, waiting on a case from the Supreme Court, EMTALA. In Louisiana, in places all over this country, abortion care is unavailable to people that may need it. You and the organization in this plan talks about changing the Department of Health and Human Services to the Department of Life. Do you think that women in America should be able to get an abortion if that is what their doctor says they need?
Abortion's not health care. I find it really interesting, if not worse, that you wouldn't support the change of the department name to the Department of Life. I thought we were all in support of life. We believe eminently in women's rights, and particularly women's rights in the womb. And so the real question that you should be asking
I just want to know, if I may, though, because I do ask the question
talking
here,
about the people
I just want to know, do you believe
legislation that abortion until 3 days after born? This is an absurd framing by this network.
That is an absurd assertion. As a person with an actual womb, I'm telling you that does not happen.
So
but let me just back up.
Legislators in California, Virginia, New York, who
Dr. Roberts,
filed those bills.
Does Heritage and Project 2025 believe that a woman should be able to have an abortion if her doctor says that she needs one? It's a yes or no question.
Abortion is not health care.
So
abortion
that is
is
a
the
no?
murder of a human being. President Trump is.
There you go. Even if a doctor says that a woman medically needs an abortion to save her life, he says it's murder. He does not believe in even medical exceptions for abortions. And probably, I mean, if he believes it's murder, then one assumes he wants to criminalize and penalize not just the person who performed it, but the woman who saw it, even if it's medically necessary. This is the grand architect, or at least one of them, of Project 2025, the right-wing supervillain plot that would allow Republicans to not just win elections, which is fine, but to radically reshape and exacerbate the institutional advantages that they already have to enact this hella dystopian illiberal agenda. I can't believe he went on. I was stunned when I saw this. I couldn't believe he went on MSNBC and agreed to be questioned. So I guess he was brave, but damn, these clips should go viral. You should share this and talk about it. This is the future that they want. Let me know what you think in the comments.
I've served in the Marine Corps for 5 years. I still keep in contact with friends and veterans. I've lost some, and you kind of personally know the sacrifice that everybody makes when you're in the military. And to see some, rich real estate guy who's never really had to work hard a day in his life call members of the military or veterans or fallen military members suckers and losers because they chose a path of serving the country. It says everything you need to know about Trump.
I am a small business owner and a Marine Corps veteran. As a Marine Corps veteran, I will not vote for somebody who evaded the military with reports of bone spurs by a doctor who was favorable to his family. And then after that, for the rest of his years, Donald Trump has spent primarily disparaging, disrespecting the military. No, I won't vote for somebody who does that.
None of us, including those old combat farts, are going to let him turn against this country. He's not going to turn the military. I despise Trump and his whole attitude towards the military. I despise his attitude today towards the fact that he does not want to support Ukraine in the fight against Russia. It's well, you stupid backwoods idiot. You want to fight them on our shores? That's what's going to happen if we don't step up and defend Ukraine. Trump is a gutless coward who would last 5 minutes in a combat zone. And then after being captured, he would be the type of POW to spill his guts to the enemy.
It was sad being prior military to hear the people storming the Capitol on January 6th being called patriots. That is not what patriotism is.
I'm a veteran. I served 8 years in the Navy. Under President Trump, not only does I think he doesn't respect the veterans, he just kicks them in the face whenever he can. When he has said, discouraging things like, I prefer, my service members who don't get captured in relation to McCain, or when he would call a family of a veteran who died in service and say they know what they signed up for. That's just cold. It's disrespectful. And that's not what a president should do. And Donald Trump seems to just wants to use the military as his own personal mercenary force, which is not good. And with some of the things he speaks about, we're going to change the country, we're going to tear up the Constitution. I worry that he might try to ask service members to turn against other Americans. And that would be one of the worst nightmares that I could possibly think of.
I've talked to people that are on the fence, and I remind them of what he said about veterans. I remind them about his past cozying up to, the Putin and the Chinese and the Hungarian dictators. I say to them, look, I'm a veteran here. I swore to uphold the Constitution. This is something Trump never will do, never has claimed to do, and simply won't do it. I mean, your vote is not for Trump or Biden. Your vote is for America.
I truly believe that he will bring us to the brink of World War III. When he backs out of NATO and gives Ukraine to Putin, Putin will invade the other NATO countries. I am a veteran, and I truly believe that this is going to happen. And when Putin invades the NATO countries, we're going to be in World War III.
I'm a veteran, 20 years in the Army, and I wanted someone to build up the military like Ronald Reagan did back in the 80s. So I thought he was the guy for America. There's so many things that scares me about Donald Trump, but I think right off the bat, one of the things he said this year is he's looking for on day one retribution. That scares me. As a veteran, that's my commander in chief. That's not somebody I could support.
I'm a retired veteran. My husband was a Navy chief who died in an aircraft mishap supporting and defending this country. My son spent 11 months in Iraq in 2023, and they fought for that election process. And for someone to thumb their nose at it, President Trump crossed the line at that moment. And then on top of that, when he disparaged after listening to John Kelly, and I believe John Kelly, I believe in that Marine, when Trump said in a private conversation that these military service members were losers, that hurt. That hurt. My husband's sacrifice does not qualify him as a loser. He's a winner. He's a hero. So for a president to belittle our service members was the final straw for me. I cannot support a man who can't lead the men and women who serve this country.
Trump's behavior on January 6th was appalling. As a former veteran of the United States Air Force, we took an oath to the Constitution to protect the Constitution against foreign and domestic enemies. To tell the January 6th protesters that we love you was just too much. I think a second term for Trump would be absolutely disastrous for both democracy and freedom in general.
I'm a veteran of World War II and the Korean War. I fought for my country, and I want my country to be strong. I certainly don't want to vote Trump back in. This would be a horrible mistake. It will destroy this country as a democracy because he doesn't care about democracy any longer.
I am a veteran, so my concern is with the damage he could do with us on an international front, what we look like as America. His interpretation of making America great is much different than mine. I fought for this country. I didn't fight for his ideals. I didn't fight so that we could be considered great.
I'm a U.S. Navy veteran, and I work for the government now. If we elect Donald Trump to another term, it will be the end of democracy as we know it. During his presidency, it was the worst time of our lives. He actively worked against veterans, so I can't support that. And I urge that you vote for Joe Biden in the 2024 elections.
I'm a Pennsylvania resident and former military. I served in the Army for 8 years. After 4 years of watching him be anti-military and calling us suckers and losers, I cannot and will not support a man that wants to become a dictator and suspend the Constitution. We do not swear loyalty and fealty when we take office or when we're in the military to one singular person, because that would make us like Russia, China, North Korea, Hungary, Iran, and a couple other countries that are authoritarian in nature. I do not want to see America become a dictatorship. That is another reason why I will not vote for that man.
I was in the military 23 years. That, of course, was the breaking point when he denied the election results, because I swore an oath to support the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And he undermined that. And that's just something we all have to find that point. It's just, he went too far. He went way too far. And if he gets back in, he'll go even farther.
Now, I can understand it doing a march to the Capitol or march to a place, but to then start destroying it and then hurting the people that are protecting that building. One, that's a violation of the Constitution right there. So as a military person, I was appalled by that. But also as a military person that was there, not myself, but people that are of the military that were there, either active or no longer part of the military, there should be severe discipline in that. They basically broke their oath and they should be held accountable. Any active duty, any military police, anybody that is part of the government in one way or the other should be removed, and they should have disciplinary action against them.
I had the privilege of serving in the United States Navy for 26 years, and I was utterly appalled at his conduct, particularly on the 6th of January, inciting people to overthrow the government. I wanted to vomit.
I'm a 20-year Army veteran, active duty, and there's absolutely no way that I can support a man who, while he was commander-in-chief, said that American servicemen that gave their lives for this country are suckers, and that POWs and pilots who were shot down are losers. And anyone that condones that, excuses that, rationalizes that, has surrendered their honor along with Donald Trump. But as I learned in many of the military leadership schools that I went through, Donald Trump displays one of the worst leadership character traits of all. He is quick to take credit for anything positive that happens anywhere around him, but he will never take responsibility for anything negative that happens. That is the absolute worst leadership trait of all. He is a horrible leader. And anyone who supports that, especially any former military, I question, what did you learn while you were serving?
I'm ex-military, and I've handled classified documents. I know the rules behind handling them, letting others see them, so forth and so on. And I just cannot agree with what he did.
I have been in our military for the last 12 years under 2 different presidents, and my job and mission has never changed or faltered in any way, no matter who the commander-in-chief is. But I can say when Donald Trump was the commander-in-chief, our allies were the most uncertain they have ever been, dating back to the Cold War to now.
I served in the military in 2 different branches, and I served to preserve our democracy. But I see that, his false claims of the voter fraud are just compromising our democracy.
I served in the military as an officer in the United States Air Force. When I was commissioned on 22 December 1982, I raised my right hand and I pledged an oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Trump swore that same oath, and that day he broke his oath to me. And so I was done with him at that point. There's nothing worse than, trying to overturn an election.
How do I feel about how Trump talks about the military? I think you have to really actually even go back to early on in his first or his only time as president, when the military took him to the war room and tried to explain to him the history behind why we've done what we've done and where we're headed with our allies, so that he wouldn't make the mistakes. And of course, he blew up and he absolutely just lambasted them about what they were doing. And it started then, in my opinion. And Trump has just constantly berated the military and talked bad about them. He asked Nikki Haley, why is it your husband? Well, he was deployed, for crying out loud. And what are you trying to say? What's your point?
I can no longer support Donald Trump. And it goes all the way back to 2017, when he supported Vladimir Putin and Vladimir Putin's ideas in Helsinki over his own Defense Department. I am a veteran, and he absolutely turned me off right there. Donald Trump may only be a year older than me. In military terms, I can't call him President of the United States, but I can call him President Bone Spurs. He had the 5 deferments, and in life there are haves and have-nots. I come up from a family of have-nots, where we sit and we struggle for every penny and stuff. I couldn't find a deferment in there. I went and served. As far as Donald Trump being the leader of the military, I would take General Milley over Donald John Trump any day of the week.
As a military member, he is not pro-military, and we're talking the United States military. He may be pro-Russian military, he may be pro-North Korean military. He's definitely not a friend of the U.S. military.
I'm a proud Marine veteran. When Trump started attacking some of our American heroes like John McCain, that guy did more for our country than probably every other senator that has come before or after him, right? He was a prisoner of war. And, for a guy to say, I like my heroes not to get captured, like, that's crazy coming from a guy that dodged the draft for Bone Spurs. It's like, are you kidding me? You're going to be the commander-in-chief and you're going to disparage people like John McCain? And then we learned that he really has that view on all of the military and all of our veterans, that we're a bunch of suckers. And I don't think that's just some sort of rumor or anything like that. I believe John Kelly, a former Marine general, when he says that, that happened. It's like, if that doesn't strike a chord in your soul, I don't know what will.
I am a retired airline captain, also spent 20 years in the U.S. Air Force. Donald Trump's recent comments about NATO really kind of hit home with me. I served on the NATO staff in Norway for 4 years. I was in the military at the time, and I was a member of that staff, and I was serving alongside other officers from other countries in NATO. The idea that this country, the United States, would somehow decide that unless someone wrote us a check for expenses, that we would allow Russia to do, as Donald Trump put it, whatever the hell they wanted to that country, is just an anathema to me. How can you be part of any kind of an alliance when you decide that you're going to threaten the other members of the alliance with whatever Russia wants to do because you don't pay what in Donald Trump's mind is the appropriate amount of money for our protection.
As a military veteran, having served twice in Iraq as a retired police officer, I was shocked to my core how the Republican Party and Trump in particular treated the Capitol Police. No one but Liz Cheney and her dad went to the memorial. And as far as Trump is concerned, me, myself, I consider him to be a traitor. And the way Trump talks about veterans leads me to believe that he has no respect for anyone in a uniform. When he talked about John McCain, at that point there, I started seriously having bad thoughts about, was he really the better option than Hillary Clinton? Trump never needs to set foot on a military base with the disrespect that he has shown to veterans.
I'm a prior service member. Now, Donald Trump has said that he wants to terminate our Constitution, the bedrock of our democracy. There's no way we can allow anyone that would say something like that to serve in the presidency. You swear an oath to the Constitution, just like every soldier does, to protect and defend the United States of America from all enemies, both foreign and domestic. Donald Trump isn't protecting anything except for himself. Another reason that I could never vote for Donald Trump again is because of what he said about our military servicemen. I can't believe that any commander-in-chief would say that they're suckers and losers, and he can't understand what was in it for them. He said these in cemeteries where our memorialized dead that had given the full measure for this country are interred. He wouldn't go to Normandy, to the cemetery in his first term, because he was afraid the rain would make his hair fall. Anybody that says these kind of things or acts like this in regard to our military servicemen and those that have served this country and died for this country doesn't deserve to ever be the commander-in-chief.
His stance with NATO probably was really the straw that broke the camel's back. I'm very interested in international affairs and national security, being former military and having family in that field. I just believe he was right as far as NATO members paying the dues that they were obligated to and not doing it. But the way he went after them, even now, the way that I fear he's going to regress and take it may sound America first, but when it's America only, that could be a problem.
I served in the Navy for 6 years and 14 years in the reserves. Trump not sincerely honoring the sacrifices of veterans, talking about John McCain as a loser and somebody who got captured as being a loser. That is just beyond the pale. I cannot understand how anyone could support this man after saying that, calling the people who died in war losers, and he himself not having served. There's no way I could support Trump.
I spent 8 years in the military, and I know what it takes to be a leader. Donald Trump is not that. The military people that he's disgraced that used to be in his cabinet, those generals he talked bad about, he actually mentioned that one of them should be executed. These generals would not support somebody that doesn't support the Constitution and support the United States. I believe in their moral character. I believe that they've made a judgment about Donald Trump, that he has no moral character and he should not be in any leadership role.
I am a 24-year Navy veteran. I served in a war. I saw the ultimate sacrifice. I cannot vote for Donald Trump because he epitomizes the worst of the people that we are. I saw this on January 6, 2021, when he incited an insurrection. That's the red line for me as far as ever voting for Donald Trump again. And I would ask my fellow citizens to vote for Biden for the good of the country, because he's not perfect. But right now, he is a better deal for this 200 and something year experiment in American democracy. We might lose it if Trump gets elected. I'm concerned about that.